time to get the show on the road. I want to thank the Historic Northside Garden Club for the lunch. It's great. Y'all want seconds, there's plenty. And I want to make a brief announcement about, I don't know if y'all know Jane Andrews, Jane Lee Gardner's, Buddy Andrews' mother. Jane had called and said the arrangements were 2 p.m. at McBride Funeral Home tomorrow. If y'all know Buddy and Amy Andrews, that's Buddy's mother died. So they had asked me to announce that. And I want to mention this exhibit that we opened this weekend. We have a little bit of it covered up today, but I hope y'all will come back and take it all in when you have the chance, because the measure of courage that I heard from the stories that came from this exhibit is just wonderful. You know, the Vietnam veterans have not been talked about, and they don't talk about themselves very much, but the class of 1960 last year gathered them together, which made it clear to us that we needed to do something here at the museum, so the class partnered with us on this exhibit. And I marvel at the stories that came out, and there's some that are still to come, I know, because we just didn't have the time and space to get everything up. But this exhibit will be up through the summer, so when you have time, please do stop and read some of the stories that have come out of this exhibit of men from this community. And with the anniversary of the Civil War being commemorated throughout our country, we thought it was time to have a look at something that is local and has a long and vibrant history in our area. And we have a great person to tell that story. Dr. Stewart Bennett is a U.S. History professor at Bllue Mountain College. He's authored 2 Civil War narratives, The Struggle for the Life of the Republic and The Battle of Bryce's Crossroads, and I believe he's working on the Atlanta campaign right now. And he also will be soon leading a tour of the Antietam battlefield and in South Mountain. So he gets around on these battlefields. He has done a lot of research on Brigadier General Perrin Lowrey. It's a name that we all know and appreciate because of what he has meant to Bllue Mountain and the region around here. So I'm looking forward to learning more about General Lowery. Dr. Bennett lives in Albany with his wife Kathy and 2 children, Emily and Nathan. And another thing that you may or may not know about Stewart is he was instrumental in beginning the internship program here and other museums and institutions in the area that has meant so much to us. So we really appreciate that, and we really appreciate having you here today. So please join me in welcoming Stewart Bennett.
Well, it is great to be with you all today. I hope that one of the really good things about today is if the speaker is awful, you still got good food. You know what I mean? And if you get bored, see, anybody who walks out of here after I say this, I know what's going on. If you get bored, there's food. You know, so let's go see what's left, you know, what we can do. So, but anyway, seriously though, it's nice to be with you today. Bllue Mountain College, I've been there for the past 4 years. The Lord's been good to us, and I've enjoyed it there. Good folks. Got to put that plug in for them. Some of you are alumni from there, and so it's great to have y'all here. And if you know of any grandkids, kids, or anybody looking for college, you come send them our way. We'd love to have them. So if I could, before we get started, I'd like to do something. I'd like to pray, and we'll go from there, okay? Heavenly Father, I do thank you for this opportunity for us to be together. I thank you for all that you've given to us, and I pray that, Lord, as we discuss Lowery, I pray that you'll just help us understand the man and the things that he had done and how you used him and how you can use all of us. And Lord, again, thank you for your love for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, I hope you guys can hear me. I usually talk pretty loud, pretty good. If not, I don't know. I'll do my best to help you. I have a couple of students that are here. I'm teaching Mississippi history right now at the college this summer. And so a couple of them have come to watch. It's part of their class. It's not like they wanted to be here. Okay? No, they're good people. When I came to Bllue Mountain, I started looking around the whole situation. They started talking about the founder, and that the founder, was this Confederate General Perrin Lowrey, and he had done all these great things. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. And I came and I saw it and I looked around, and it was very interesting to me. And I've been working on a book on the Battle of Atlanta, and of July 22nd of 1864. And Lowry was involved in that battle and his men, and it was really interesting some of the things that he had to say and some of the things that happened. And I thought it was rather interesting. Here's this man that they talk about on this hill over here at Bllue Mountain College, this founder, who did a lot of different things. And so as time went on, I started to pull some information together about the President Lowry. You could say General Lowry or Reverend Lowry. There's many titles that you could give him. And he was used in a number of ways. And see, as you can see, I've got books on the Civil War. I'm really interested in the Civil War part. So just give me the Lowry from the war. That's what I really want. But as I started studying all that and looking at Lowry, there's a lot more to this man that meets the eye. The war is just a part. It's not him, okay? He's bigger than that. And God used him in much greater ways than just being in a war. Now, don't get me wrong, Civil War is very interesting, and of course I enjoy studying that. But the more I started to study Lowry, the more the man came out, and it was like, you know what? I kind of like this guy, this pastor. I like this guy, the educator, as well. And so today what I want to do is kind of give you a background in the short 5 hours that we have. But in the short time that we do have, what I want to do is I want to go over his life a little bit. And I know Catfish Lowry is back here and his son. And hopefully they won't throw me out on getting anything wrong, but they can help me out a little bit and move me on the right way. But I want to look at his early life, and we'll move from there. And let's look at at Lowry, not necessarily the general, but Lowry, the man of God, the man that was used, okay? First of all, in his early life, he was the youngest son of 11 children. Now, some of you are like, so? Because some of you came from some big families. My mother came from, she was one of 12, okay? So that was very common, 1860s, moving all the way up into the 1900s early. Today, 2's enough. That's all I want. That works for me. But he was, like I said, he was the youngest son of 11 children, 6 girls, 5 boys. So he had to learn to work within that community, right? Okay, it wasn't all boys and it wasn't all just girls. His father, Adam Lowry, died when Mark was only about 9 years old. What had happened, his father had gotten the fever and died, and he was buried down in the area of Natchez, way south of here. Okay, so he passes away, and here is Mark Lowry, 9 years old, living in the Tennessee area near a place called Finger. Easy to remember that, okay? So he comes out of that area. Brothers, sisters, mom, lost a father at 9. That's rough. Some people would look at that as a crutch now and say, I can't go on and do anything. I lost my father when I was young, therefore life is over and blah, blah. No, life's still beginning for you, okay? And so Lowry moved on. His family, his mom took the family and they moved to Farmington, Mississippi when he was about 15 years old. At the age of 17, he accepted Christ as his personal Lord and Savior. Now, you got to understand something. It didn't all of a sudden the skies open up and life is just wonderful for him, okay? He's still one of many children with a mom trying to eke out a living. He's 17 years old, and he's like a lot of people. You got to have money to survive, right? And so he's looking at that, and you got to understand, when you don't have a whole lot of money, and I grew up that way, we didn't have much at all, you want security, you want to make money. You're looking towards your future and taking care of it. And he wasn't any different than anyone else around his age. He struggled with ambition and wealth. Yeah, he wanted to do things. He wanted to be somebody. He wanted to make that money. He wanted to get up there and he wanted to move. Okay? Now, there's not necessarily anything necessarily wrong with that. Okay? It's good to have ambition. Doesn't hurt to have some money. Okay? If you feel that you feel bad about having money, feel free to give me it after the meeting. That'd be fine. No, but seriously though, he struggled with those kinds of things. And then the war with Mexico came up. And this is in the late 1840s. And he's decided, I'm going to go. Now, you got to understand, during that time period, the different states were called to send so many troops. They might take 1,000 from Mississippi, which they did. They might take 2,000 from, say, Indiana, and 1,000 from Ohio, and that kind of thing. You can kind of match it up with some of you, if you watch that American Idol, you see all those people running to these auditions, and there's thousands of them. Well, Mark Lowry was one of 11,000 that showed up for one of them 1,000 spots. Okay? And he didn't get in. All right? They said, no, that's too many Mississippians. It's an interesting thing about Mississippi. We're ready for a fight. You know, we're all in for it. Okay? So 10,000, including him, were turned away. Well, as the war goes on, and as war does happen, at first everybody wants to join. They're afraid, I won't get there in time. I want to have something to tell my grandkids, that kind of thing. And he doesn't get in. But later on, people are like, I don't think this is a great idea after all. I wished I hadn't signed up in some cases. There are some people that are like, okay, now we're losing folks. In the war with Mexico, we lost more men to disease, which is true in most wars, if not all of them. We lose them more to disease than we ever did by the bullet. Okay? So now openings started coming up, and they were taking in recruits. And this time, the second time around, Perrin Lowrey goes to war, okay? So he goes to the war with Mexico, and I'd love to tell you that he did all kinds of wonderful things, but he didn't. He becomes a member of the 2nd Mississippi Regiment, and his regiment never engaged in battle. What do you think they did most of the time?
Marched.
They were in camp marching. They drilled, and that is pretty much what he had to do. When the war was over, he comes back home. And this is when some changes starting to happen for him. He starts to think about, okay, making money and all these kinds of things. He's gone off to the war. He's had some time to think. And he came up with this quote that I want to read to you, and I want you to think about it because it kind of encapsulates his life as he goes along. He said this, I was soon called to positions that opened the way to usefulness, gave me a support for my family, opportunities to improve my education, and to give myself wholly to my profession. And I had gained a victory over my ambition to gain wealth. Again, nothing wrong with wealth, but that whole ambition, that worry about it, okay? That's what I want to do. He says, as I had gained a victory over my ambition to gain wealth, this was all I asked. And I never indulged a moment's thought of turning from the holy calling to make money, or for any civil or military position. Okay? So what he's saying here is, God's providing, I'm going into the ministry, I'm not going to worry about civic office like becoming governor or anything like that. I'm not going to worry about military and raising up in the ranks and that kind of thing. I'm not going to worry about the money thing, because that's under God's control. What's interesting about this is when he let God take control of it, all of a sudden those opportunities show up. He didn't ask for them, they happen. Okay? Sometimes they're turned down and sometimes he went, but it was because he felt God had called him when he went to these things. Now let's look at that and let me explain what I mean. He's a minister at the age of 24. Now, he's not a pastor of just one church. Okay? If we have any pastors here, one church is enough. Okay? He was a pastor at multiple churches. He went around to 3 or 4 speaking at different times. Okay? All over North Mississippi. He was involved in Kossuth and different places like that. So he was a minister at the age of 24, pastored various churches. The war, though, the American Civil War comes along now. And so people are going off the war, but he had made his statement. He had said, I'm not looking to go into military rank, right? He's not worried about that kind of thing. Well, when the war calls in the church and he's speaking, the people call on him and say, you know, didn't you fight in the war with Mexico? Yeah, but that was a long time ago. That was marching. We think you should go to the war with our husbands, our sons. He's like, no. That's not what I'm called for. Not going to do it. Well, he gets pressure more from his church members. As a matter of fact, he feels the need to serve because, I guess we can click to the next one. It shows you a picture of him older. You can go to the next one too. I'll show you guys real quick. This is more of the shots of war with Mexico. And then the next one. this is where we'll stop right here. This has him in uniform. But here's the thing. Lowry's decided, no, I'm not going to go off the war. The people keep pressuring him. We want you to. We feel more comfortable that you are with our husbands, that you are with our sons doing this kind of thing. Please go. Well, next thing you know, April 6th and 7th of 1862, even before that, you've got Yankee Union soldiers coming down through Tennessee, Kentucky, Tennessee, coming in towards Mississippi. The closer they get, the more pressure that's on him, the more he starts to feel like, Lord, I think if I'm going to go, I want to go with my people here, okay, and help them, watch over them, and be used that way. So he goes ahead and he finally decides, I'll do it. So he feels the need to serve, and he goes ahead and he does it. He joins the troops. He becomes a Confederate officer. Not necessarily that he wanted to, but they picked him to be colonel of the 32nd Mississippi Infantry Regiment. Okay? So he goes in as the colonel, and he's going to see an awful lot of fighting. As a matter of fact, he and his men are going to go a lot of different places. He's going to fight. They do not fight at Shiloh. Sometimes people said, well, Lowry was at Shiloh. The only thing that Lowery did at Shiloh, for the most part that I could find in my research, is when prisoners were coming back from the battle, he and his men gathered those people and moved them on. They did not see actual fighting over that. It did not happen. Now, he is around Corinth. They start out pretty much with some of the fighting that goes on in Corinth, the back and forth after Shiloh. He's going to be with the Army all the way through to Nashville, all 4 years. Okay? As a matter of fact, he's at the Battle of Perryville, if you'll show that here. Can you figure that one out? I love this map because it's crazy. Okay? It's like, what in the world? It blows everybody's mind. So anyways, what I thought we would do is we will follow every Confederate regiment as they go across. That's a joke. You're supposed to. No. What happens is, it's more about where's Lowry? You know, where's Waldo? Where's Lowry over here, okay? Well, what happens is Lowry is part of Wood's division there, or brigade, I should say. And so here they are, and I believe it's at one point in the fighting close to it that Wood is wounded. And now Lowry's in charge, okay? Boom. Here we are, we're in Perryville, Kentucky, 62. They've been drilling. He has background in drill, but not a whole lot of fighting. Guess where they end up? Right there, right smack dab in the middle of it all. And he leads his men through that, okay? Now the Confederates, at the end of this fight, you can go to the next picture. After the end of this fight, it's pretty much the battle, you know, they're in line and they're fighting. The Confederates are pushed back, but Lowry ends up getting wounded in the left arm. And it's a bad wound. So much so that they send him home to convalesce. You can go to the next one there. And we'll go back to Kentucky. Okay? So anyways, he goes home for a while. And the story is told that while he's at home, he's almost captured. Union troops come through the Mississippi area, Corinth, Kossuth area, looking for soldiers, hearing different things. They asked, the story is told that they asked the children, is your father home? And the kids, they don't know any better. Kids are usually going to tell the truth. And they said, no, he's off fighting the Yankees, you know, that kind of thing. And so they're like, okay, well, good enough then. And for the most part, they leave. The children did not know their father was home. They kept that secret. And so he was up, hid away. And so by doing so, he lives to fight another day. He heals up, he goes back to the Army, and he moves on from there. Of course, there are battles that are going to be fought in 63. There's going to be battles fought in 64. You can go to the next one there, please. At Kennesaw Mountain, supposedly, you can see again, here's some fighting here, and there's fighting down here. Lowery in the thick of this down here, about Cheatham Hill. If you've not been to Cheatham Hill, that was a mess. Union soldiers were slaughtered up and down through there. It got so bad in this area that things started catching fire from all of the spark and the artillery and the whole bit. There's different stories out there, and different people are credited. There are two people credited with this incident that I'll tell you about, and one of them's Lowery. What happens is, as the fighting is going on, there's a real fear. Okay, even during the war, they try to have some semblance of something. But in the middle of this whole situation, there's a fire that gets started up, and supposedly the Confederates stop fighting, okay, under Lowery, and they're able to break it up, get the wounded soldiers out of the way of the fires that are starting so they don't catch fire, put it out, okay, and then everything goes back again. Okay, so it's really interesting. And supposedly, Lowery has something to say in that. I can't guarantee that. One soldier says that, another soldier says it was another person, but his name does come up, and he's very prominent that way as a leader on the battlefield, okay? Another thing about him is that in camp, not only did he lead his men out there in the field, okay, into the battle, into the fight and the death, he also was in camp working with the soldiers. And the interesting thing they mentioned is he was preaching. When they were free on Sundays and other times, he would be preaching, and the soldiers would come to listen to him. He would baptize people. There were soldiers in the Confederate Army he would baptize during the breaks, and that includes winter. Okay? That's cold. All right? But he was there, and he would do that. And he was a very good example to his soldiers. He led from the front, led from the back, wherever, but he led. Okay? And they respected him and they trusted him. And remember, a number of these guys, not all of them, but a number of them came from his area and from his churches. The troops that were in his group were mostly Mississippians and Alabamians. Okay? So he led as an example. He fought. As a matter of fact, if we go back to the fighting, he was part of Claiborne's command. And if you know anything about Claiborne's command, those guys saw an awful lot of fighting most of the time. You look for the flags where Claiborne was, and if you were in the Union, you were like, glad we weren't fighting them, okay, because it was some hard fighting. As a matter of fact, by the time that the war is over, every general in that group of Claiborne's command has been either wounded, mortally wounded, killed outright, or severely wounded, except for Lowery. Now, am I telling you God planned it that way that he's protecting him? Maybe. You know, God works in a lot of different ways. Other people took horrendous wounds, but he didn't. And he did lead. There were times he was almost captured. He lost his horse in Nashville in that last big fight there. I believe it was lost there in the mud. I have to go back and look. I believe it was shot as well. So anyways, he follows the Confederate Army. He leads his men. They get towards the end of the war. It looks like this thing's over with. They get somewhere around the Carolinas, and he's allowed to go to Richmond. He actually rides to Richmond, is from what I would gather from some of the things that he has even said, and he resigned from his position. Now, here's the caveat here. He said, look, the reason I'm leaving isn't that, you know, he's upset with how the war's being run and that kind of thing, but he admitted to the government, he said, for number one, the cause is lost. It's over. Okay? Number two, there are too many officers. We got lots of officers who can do the job. You really don't need me as one of them. Okay? And number three, he wanted to be with his men when the end came. Interesting. On top of that, he stayed with them as a chaplain. He wanted to stay. I will go ahead and give up the generalship. You can have it. You got other people, I believe he said, more ambitious. Remember what we talked about before about ambition? And he wasn't necessarily looking for that. Okay? So he said, you can take it. But I want to be with my guys at the end, and I want to be the chaplain for the Army. And so they accepted it. And that's what happened. So the war finally ends, and he comes back to North Mississippi. And when you come back to North Mississippi, you see there's a lot changed. Fields are messed up. Houses are burned or broken into. Lots of things are lost. Family members come back without an arm or a leg or both, or can't see or hear, or all of those things, or they don't come back at all. It's a hard situation. So you look at the situation in the South was bad. Mississippi was really tough. And Lowery knew that as his mission. So back home, he had his own family of 11 children. Okay? 11 children altogether. He felt he was called out by Christ to serve the people in Mississippi, and that he did. He worked with the local churches like he did before. He had many churches that he was going around. He founded some churches. I believe some of you here are from some of the churches that he founded. Yes, Exactly. So founding and also going to different ones. He was the evangelist pastor of the state, not just of North Mississippi, not Tippah County, but the state. Okay? Evangelist pastor of the state. You can go ahead to the next one. Probably turn it off because I think that's all that we've got. He also went out and raised money. Interesting thing about Lowrey, he didn't have a whole lot, but he wasn't worried about that. He was raising money for the different causes he felt Christ had called him to do. One was an orphan's home for veterans' children. Now, there come a point in time when it was really hard to try to raise the money for these children, but he went out and raised money to try to help these kids. It finally came to the point, at one point in time, where they just weren't going to be able to keep it open. And he went around asking people to take children from the orphanage. And he lived by example. He took one of those children in as his own. Okay? So he wasn't just asking people to do something he wouldn't do. He did it himself. Also missions. He was crucial in fundraising. But I think one of the biggest challenges that he probably had within his family was when his daughter came to him and she said, you know, Dad, Father, I'm sure she didn't call him Dad, Father, the thing is, I feel God's called me to missions. And I'm sure he was pretty proud of her to hear that. You're really proud when you're a parent when you hear that, but then the second thing is what? Where? Okay? And she said, China. Now, understand, it's not the communist China that we know today, okay? Very backwood kind of thing, out away from a lot of education. It was a different place, and that still is a lot the same in some ways. But she wanted to go there and help those people. And he said, well, God may be calling you to do that, you think, but God's not calling me to say, yeah, you should go. Okay? I'm not feeling it, in so many words. So here he was saying, you're not going to China. But I feel called. Yeah, I understand that, but I think you need to go back and pray. Now, it's at that point, maybe it was him that needed to go back and do some praying. You know what I mean? To let your daughter go off to China in the 1800s? Okay, that's scary. There's no phones or anything. And so, after a while, he had to search his own heart. And he had to think this through. And finally, he came to grips with it and said, you know what? If that's what God wants, how can I stand in the way? And he let his daughter go off and said, that's fine. If God's called you, we will do that. Okay? He goes up to the railroad at Middleton, Tennessee. He gets out there to the train with her and at the depot and sends her off. Man, it's got to be tough. Here's a guy who fought in a civil war and crazy hellacious battles, but I bet you that was one battle that must have been heart-rending. Okay? She goes on, and if you ever come over here to Bllue Mountain College, a lot of things from China are over there that she brought back. And you got to see it. It's all in the library and everything. The dresses and different things, so I think you'll enjoy that. So she goes off, and he's accepted that. She comes back in time. She comes back to us after some time. And but it was a great thing that he was able to come to grips with that, and not an easy situation. The other thing that he was involved with was he helped save Mississippi College. Mississippi College was hurting, going under. He got out there and he raised the money to keep Mississippi College going. He also sent his sons to Mississippi College. Okay? This guy didn't have a whole lot of money, but he's doing everything he can to help them. And that's why always in my back of my mind I think, if we ever have some really crunch times, we got to bring that up to Mississippi College and say, hey, you know. But anyway, now seriously though, he was involved that way. He was also, as we've said before, he was the founder of Bllue Mountain College, and it was the women's institution. It was for women, white women. It wasn't for men. It wasn't for black people. It was white women to go to college there. And folks, that is what you call progressive. Back in 1873 when this happened, women going to college, a lot of times it's like, you don't need an education, we need you to work here on the farm and to do these things. My mother only got up to a 7th grade education because she had to get out in them fields in Alabama and pick cotton. Okay? And she was fortunate to even get a 7th grade education. All right? So, not uncommon, but here he is saying, I believe that education is important not just for men, but for women as well. And he opened that. Okay? So God led him to that. He was instrumental in making that happen. I think he was thinking about building a college. Maybe not, I don't know if it goes as far back as the Civil War, but soon after the war, I think that was on his mind that he wanted to make something happen. He served 10 years as the president of the Mississippi Baptist Convention. And he's the only person to ever have done that. And think about it. Who in the right mind wants to be president for 10 straight years of the Mississippi Baptist Convention? That's a lot of work. Okay? It's a lot going on. But he took it on and he made it happen. He also wrote for the Tennessee Baptist newspaper. A lot. If you go back, you can see all kinds of things that he wrote. He was in multiple churches. He was raising money for all kinds of different things. He was founding a college. He was writing in the newspapers. People came to him and said, you know what, you fought in the war and you've done so much here in Mississippi and everybody loves you, you need to run for governor. Remember that ambition thing? And he said, no. There were a number of people that wanted him to do that, but he was like, that's fine, but it's not going to happen. That's not what I'm called to. Isn't that interesting? Well, after that, he got involved with the school and did a lot of things with the students there. And one of the things that he would do is he would take students who were going on mission trips or other kinds of trips, and he would take them up to Milton, Tennessee, and they would get on the trains and he would watch them go off and they did their thing. Well, this went on for quite some time. But on February the 27th of 1885, he took some students to the train area and was seeing them to say goodbye around the same place where he had sent his daughter off to China, when she first went off. He's in that same kind of area there. It's at that point that he died of a heart attack. Fell right there and passed away. And it was interesting to think about this guy. Here he was all the way up to 1885, passes away in the midst of helping people to do things. You know what I mean? To send them off to ministry, to send them off to home, to do other things. Not necessarily thinking of himself. Went off to war not to become a general, but looking out for the welfare of people from his church. Okay? The interesting thing is he also helped after the war with some of the black churches in the area. Okay? So he reached out to a lot of different groups. So when I look at his life and we think about Lowrey, I think we can look at these things right here. In examining him, we find a man who was a human. He struggled over material wealth at first. Number two, he was a leader on the battlefield and within the Baptist church. Number three, he was always striving to do more. Tireless work with the churches is what he performed. Number four, he understood the importance of education, not just for men, but for women as well. Number five, he loved God and he followed him. And number six, he led his family to love God. Many of them went on to do different things. But when you look back at a life like this, it makes you wonder. There's a lot of people that can do a lot of things with a lot of money. But God used this man to do an awful lot without very much. And he used him because he was willing to be used. Now, God can use us no matter what. But I think it makes it a little bit easier when we try to follow him. So when you think of Bllue Mountain College, you think about General Lowrey, I hope you'll see that here's a man who was used by God in an incredible way, and that here's a legacy of something that he did that still lives on today. So, well, anyways, do you have any questions or anything? Yes?
How was he educated?
Oh, how was he educated? I'd have to go back and double check on some of that. He did not go to college that I can recall. Catfish, do you have a...
I'm going to say 90% of it, as I understand it, was self-education.
It was what?
Self-education.
Exactly. A lot like Nathan Bedford Forrest. Self-education, you hard knocks. You're living in Tennessee at that time, in Mississippi. This is the West. At that time period when they were growing up, this was the West. When people said you're going out west, they weren't talking about California. Okay? They were talking about Mississippi. And Natchez was wild. Okay, that was the Wild West down there, especially around the 1820s, 1830s. But yeah, a lot of them, they weren't getting the education, not from around here.
Where's he buried?
He is buried right up on top of Bllue Mountain, right up there on the hill. You go out behind us, and when I came here about 4 years ago, how many of you have been out to the gravesite up there? If you get a chance, go out, because about 4 years ago when we went up there, we set that as a project. The rails around it needed painted, and there was a lot of mold and things on the tombstones, and especially his and the Berry family. And we took that whole plot and we cleaned all of that up. And it looks so much better, and we need to do some more cleaning. But if you get a chance, here's what's interesting. If you go there and you look at the old part of the cemetery, you'll notice that his is probably the highest one there. And he would be the last person to want that. I just about guarantee you he wouldn't look for that kind of attention, okay? But it has the shaft there, and it's from the students of Bllue Mountain College, or Bllue Mountain Women's Institute, I believe it says on there. And it's all cleaned up, and if you get a chance to go out there, you should. Very, very interesting little place there. Yes?
You said he started several churches. Can you name a couple we might
Well, I know we've got
recognize?
Somerton, right? Salisbury. I can't tell you exactly the churches he founded, but he was in a number of churches that he not necessarily started, but spoke in them, helped with, was a pastor in different ones. He, that whole evangelism thing too, he was a lot of places in Mississippi, especially North Mississippi. Yes?
He was instrumental in First Baptist here,
Oh, really?
and founded First Baptist at Corinth, Mount Moriah, above Ripley.
Now this is
Quite-
Catfish,
quite a
Lowery.
few of them.
Okay, so you
How
know.
is he related?
Yes.
How is he related?
How are you related? You tell me.
Great-grandson,
Great-grandson.
and this is a great-great-grandson.
It's good to have you guys with us, yes.
Is there a lot known about his mother and his wife?
There are things out there, there's some books and things about Mother Berry. We have a number of things on campus too. If you visit, we've got his chair, we got some great portraits of him and his wife, and some different things on the family.
Who was his wife?
Excuse me?
Who was his wife?
Mother Berry? Oh gosh, you guys are killing me. We all call her Mother Berry, you know?
No.
I'm sorry.
Mother Berry was the daughter.
Mother Berry was the daughter. What was mom's first name? Y'all remember?
Sarah Holmes was his
Sarah
wife,
Holmes? Okay.
and she had more guts than he did.
Yes, she did. That's right. Sarah, especially with the whole Corinth, the costume, all that up in there with the Yankees coming down. So some interesting stuff there. Yes. Oh, goodness gracious, you kind of killed me. I was supposed to see mainly on Lowery and not the going off with the daughter's name that went to China. Oh, you people. Let's see. Do you know you don't know her? Praise
I don't
God.
know which one it was.
Her name was Tammy. Yeah, that's it. No, I don't. Any hard questions, put your hands down. Yes, go ahead.
There's a placard on the new edition at the library that has her name.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good. Very good.
I should know it, I just, I'll be 74 day after tomorrow, and my brain doesn't work as good as it does.
At least you're not asking me things, how many people died in his regiment at Kentucky. Yes?
When he gave up his standing in the army, did he give up pay? Did he give, what else did he give up?
He didn't worry about
Besides
the
his
pay.
title?
Yeah, the whole thing. He's like, you can have it. Just make me a chaplain. This thing's over. They're not worried about pay anymore because we're talking 1865. I think he went around, the Army was not really fighting yet. I think he gets back in time for Bentonville. But at that time, everything's just clustered around, and the Army's been defeated pretty good out of Nashville. And so he knows it's done. So I don't think he's worried about getting paid because,
Boy, nobody gets that.
ain't nobody getting paid. Yeah, it wasn't going to happen. But say it again. Another question or? No, okay. But yeah, that's it. For him, he knew it was over, but, and like you said, there's awful lot of officers, a lot of guys wanting to move up, and he's like, it's over, you can have it, and went back to his guys. So, any other questions?
Okay. Now, Perrin Lowrey, who taught the English in the English department, and Lawrence, who was president of the college, were they brothers?
Yeah, weren't they?
Yes.
Lowry, the president and the Lowry in the English department were brothers.
Yeah, Perrin Senior is my father, and Lawrence is my uncle.
They were grandsons? I can't answer that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were grandsons.
They were the grandsons? Okay. Yes.
Isn't there a tree stump or a part of the tree at Academy Church where he was under this tree when he had this desire to
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jill. There's a tree stump.
Well, it's a tree stump or a part of a tree at Academy Baptist Church. He was under this tree when God gave him this inspiration to.
My uncle built a cabinet to put it in,
Yeah.
where
That's
he
been preserved.
decided for Bllue Mountain College under that tree at Academy
So
Baptist
you're gonna have to
Church.
write a book about it. Yes, you know that.
No, I think you guys need to write a book about it. You know more about all that stuff than I do. But anyway, wow, interesting. Very good.
Somebody had Facebooked me this morning that his wife had written a very interesting book. And I guess that is at Bllue Mountain, that's something that's
It
available?
should, it depends on which one you're talking about. Because we have a few different ones that we've got.
I think it's gonna be his daughter that actually wrote the book.
His daughter? That's the Motherberry book? Okay, we've got that in our collection. I was
Yeah.
just wondering.
The Light on the Hill.
Yeah. Light on the Hill is the one you're talking about?
No, I think this one just, it says Motherberry is all it says. It may be about her.
It's gotta be the same one, isn't it?
Buzzing.
Yeah, okay, yeah. it's the same one. Yeah, anything about Lowry?
Tell us a little bit more about the 32nd and what all composed that industry. I'm curious about that.
The 32nd Mississippi would have been mostly North Mississippi area. It's not necessarily pulling from other counties. You're looking up in the North Mississippi area.
Tippah.
Yeah, you're looking at, see, Union didn't exist yet, Lee didn't exist yet. Lee and Union were part of Tippah. Tippah was a huge place, and so they pulled a lot of those, the Corinth, Kossuth, that kind of area from 32nd Mississippi. So he'd want to go back to them, but he still, you know, he was over that whole brigade of soldiers from Alabama and Mississippi.
Do you know how many came back with you at the end of the war?
How many came back? No, I can't tell you how many total came back from that group. Or specifically from his church, which would be kind of interesting. But then again, which church? There's quite a number of churches he was around. So he had quite an influence with those people. But again, you gotta remember, his influence was far-ranging all over Mississippi, but especially northeast Mississippi. That's where he definitely was from, yeah.
Do any of his sermons exist?
Yes, I think some of them have been in the Tennessee, I don't know if you remember any of them, Catfish, but I think there were some up in Tennessee in the newspaper he used to write for. I think there might be some there.
Maybe archived at Bllue Mountain?
And as far as archiving, I do not recall seeing any archived at Bllue Mountain. I'd have to go and take a look to see what was going on there. I mainly, when I was looking for his stuff, I'm looking for letters from him, especially anything from the war. Sad to say, we don't have a whole lot on Lowry, you know, as far as letters from the war. We don't have any letters from the war that I can find. But there's a few different things. You know, they do, like I said, the chair, and they did the portrait of them, and there's some different things there that you can go into the library and take a look at and see. And if you want the whole family background, then yeah, you can start from there and pull the women and all those kinds of things. But Motherberry was and the daughter, she was very instrumental at Bllue Mountain, involved big time with the students as time goes on. Yeah, and it's interesting to see how it grew, how the college grew, and then they had to tear. Boy, some of the buildings, some of those dorm buildings, the one that you had on the thing, some of those had to be gone, you know, and have been replaced by different ones. I think Fisher Washburn replaced one. But we're always looking at different things. Yes, ma'am?
Was Martha Berry his granddaughter?
Excuse me?
Was Martha Berry his granddaughter?
Martha Berry was the granddaughter, wasn't she?
Daughter.
No?
Oldest,
Was the
oldest daughter.
Very good.
She's actually the one that told the troops that he was out killing Yankees.
Yeah, he's out killing Yankees. And, but she didn't know any better. I wonder what she would have said if, well, yeah, my dad's home, he's gonna beat you. And it's like, oh, really? And then he would have been gone, so, and gone off to prison, so. Who's to say what would have happened there? Like I said, he was the only one to be, you know, he was wounded or slightly wounded while the rest of the leadership took severe wounds or mortal, at Franklin. You know, you lose 6 and then 6 to the wounds there of Confederate generals, and Lowery could have gone down. Lowery went and wrote an autobiography, which is really interesting because when you think of an autobiography, you think of a book and it's kind of thick, but it's not. It's just a number of pages, you know, about so long on paper, and it's probably, what, 8, 9 pages long, and I was looking at it for specifics, and he gives some good information on Ringgold Gap, talks about the fighting there and how he helped with that, and they talk about some different places, but the Battle of Atlanta, he doesn't talk about that in his autobiography a huge amount. He talks about it, but not as much as I wanted him to. If you go back to the official records of the War of the Rebellion, he does his reports, you know, writes his reports, and that's where I got a lot of information from him too, is those official records. But you got to sit there, and it takes time, but you read through those and you see what he saw, what was going on. At the Battle of Atlanta, okay, on July 22nd, 64, it kind of answers your question about how many died. He lost, he thought, somewhere around half of his men in that one fight that day. Okay? It was awful. Now, you got to remember, as troops come in and they die or they go back home or they go off to sick leave, others fill their spot. Okay? So you have some that have been here the whole 4 years or so, and some have been there for a year or 2 or whatever. Sometimes it's conscripts, people they just had to grab. You know, it's like, hey, how come you're not in the Army? And they grab them. Those don't make the best soldiers. They already don't want to be there, okay? But interesting thing at Chickamauga, and that was a blood fest right there, where September 19th and 20th of 1863, when his men hit the Union line, almost, you know, right along the main Brotherton Road. And I was out there with some of the students. We went to Chickamauga to see where Lowery had fought, and the chief historian of the parks there, it's a friend of mine, we went out and he showed us on this knoll area, this is where they came in, and the commander, Wood, was not there for some reason. They can't give a good reason why. Lowery led them in, and it's at that point he became brigadier general there at Chickamauga. And so he would move on from there. But he had been a colonel up until 63. Yes?
Yeah, but can you imagine what inner turmoil he must face? I mean, knowing that his mission was to save souls, take the lives at the same time.
Yeah, you have to, you gotta look at that and say, okay, I'm leading these men and I love these men and I'm, you know, they're your friends. And that's the hard part about war, is you know they're your friend, and then the next thing you know, they're dead, or some horrendous thing has happened to them. And it's, you know, some people would say it's easier to be in war if you don't make friends with people, but that's just about impossible, isn't it? I mean, you're going to know people. For him to lead them to Christ and then to lead them on the battlefield had to be a difficult thing. And I haven't seen anything from him writing on that, so I don't want to assume anything. But it had to have been a difficult, perplexing situation for him to deal with. But he did it, and that was his job. So, but you got to also understand this. And that time period, too, to lose an arm or lose a leg was a sign of bravery, too. I mean, yeah, you don't want to lose those things, but especially for them, if they came back, that's kind of their badge of courage kind of thing. You still don't want that to happen to people, but he would lead them, and you just had to live it the best you could, you know? It's just, war's an awful thing. It's just an awful thing. But it happens. And so even men of God find themselves in the midst of those kinds of things. So, I don't know. I would imagine it must have been difficult to work the two together. I'm sure he was happy the war was over. He did his duty, but finally it's over and we can move on. But you got to remember, Mississippi is one of the most poorest states after the Civil War. I mean, it's destitute. We don't have a lot of industry. We did not have much industry at all. It's agriculture. And you had to own the land. A lot of people couldn't pay the taxes to own the land. And so they lost it. And so a lot of people ended up on their land, but they didn't own it anymore, and they were sharecropping. The owner now gets half of your stuff, and you keep half, and how are you ever going to move up? I mean, it was desolate, it was hard times, and Lowery was reaching people as a pastor in some very difficult times. You imagine what the questions he probably would have gotten from people who said, my husband was killed in the war, how come God let that happen? How come we're sharecroppers now, we've got nothing, and we thought we were doing what was right? You know, my husband was great, and now he's gone, and we always followed God, and what do we do now? How do we live? You know? I mean, that's one of the things he's probably raising money to help these people, to help these orphans, the whole situation in Mississippi. I mean, this one man spread himself thin all over. So.
It's a wonder there wasn't more Jesse Jameses running around.
Excuse me?
It's a wonder there wasn't more Jesse Jameses running around.
Yeah, there
Jesse
probably were
Frank.
to an extent, we just don't know of them. They weren't as famous, you know, that kind of thing. But any other...
Was he at the Battle of Franklin?
I believe he was the Battle of Franklin, that I can recall. I have to go back, but I'm pretty sure that he was. And I don't think he had a reason not to be there because he is at Nashville, and Nashville happens soon after. Franklin is in November, Nashville's in December. And that was a messed up time because he was serving under John Bell Hood, and I would have liked to have heard more about how he felt about Hood, because there were officers that liked Hood, and there were those who didn't. And when Hood made that decision at Franklin to charge, and a lot of people were like, we're not ready for this, we don't have the artillery, they did it anyway, and it turned out to be quite a slaughter. So, yes.
From a historian's perspective, how do you feel about Hood?
As a historian, the way that I look at it is there are a lot of people who don't like him, and there's a lot of people who do like him, and I try to play the middle as far as I do my own research and make my own decision. The John Bell Hood that ran the Army in Atlanta, because he was backed up to the gates when he took it over, he didn't have much of a choice. Johnston was relieved of his duty because he did not fight. President Davis thought. So Hood can't do the same thing. He's got to fight. So here's Hood trying to fight. I believe that you have Hood at the Atlanta campaign is one thing. Hood after the Atlanta campaign around late October, November, especially November, December is a whole different guy. I think he's frustrated. He just can't get things going the way he would like. It's a long, long story. But I tend to like Hood. I think he's gotten a bad rap to an extent. But that's the early part, I would agree with him. But the last part, Franklin, Nashville, there's something not right. A new book has come out about Hood. It should be out here real soon. And it's a descendant, and he's given some new information. And the Hood papers have been found. And they are going through those. And it discredits a lot of things, negative things that a lot of historians have said about Hood. But I want to give the guy a fair shake. Yes?
The leaders in these battles were required to write about the incident that happened.
Yes, the official records. Yeah, their reports.
It was placed in where it could be obtained.
Supposed to be,
I don't
most
know
of
whether
it.
it's ever been assembled or not.
Yeah. The official records, what he's talking about is the communications during the fights and all that stuff, and also your report after the battles. That's all on the official record of the War of the Rebellion. Not all of them got there. They were putting this all together, and they published it in 1888, and you know how it goes. You're putting something together, and then after the fact, you find more. They found enough stuff back by 1990s, I think it was, to do a supplemental to the official records of the War of the Rebellion, and it's about 100 volumes, about that thick. Now, the official records is 132 volumes, I believe, and then you have the Navy's, which is about 29 volumes already.
Where is it?
Excuse me?
Where are those records?
You can find, I have a set, I have a set of the official records. I don't have the supplemental. Corinth, you can get them on CD, but Corinth Interpretive Center has them. All the battlefields do to an extent. We have, I think, an original set of the official records, but I won't touch them because they're so old that flipping through them, they're going to tear. You know what I mean? Yes?
More than a rich.
Well, I'm on a roll now. I'm starting to get some.
But, you know, as a minister, the battlefield was a great analogy because just as they had to be prepared for battle, you better be prepared to meet your maker. You never know what day.
That's right. That's right. And I wouldn't doubt that he preached that in the camps, and he baptized an awful lot of people. In the winter of 64, in the Atlanta, before the Atlanta campaign, you saw a mass amount of Confederate soldiers being saved, being baptized, the whole bit. So lots of interesting things going on. They also had the original, at that time it was the Snowball Battle. I think Lowery's men may have been involved in that, where they actually had a big snow, and I think Claiborne's division was against Stewart, I think, and they all had snowball fight. Things you did when you got bored, I guess. But anyway, so. Well, I want to thank you guys for having me today. I hope that you learned something. I've learned something from y'all, and I really do appreciate it. I would, if it's okay if I could mention, I do have a couple of books. If anyone's interested in books or anything, this was the first book that I did. This is a shameless plug. But this is The Struggle for the Life of the Republic. Now, this is a soldier with the Union Army from the 76th Ohio. And you think, that's a Yankee. But I understand it's a Yankee. But here's the thing. When you've got a Confederate who fought here in the Western Theater, and you got a Yankee who fought in the Western Theater, and they fought against each other a lot, then you can really understand where they're coming from. Miller talks about fighting here in Vicksburg and on the Deer Creek expedition and the whole siege. It's the struggle for the life of the Republic. And it was Charles David Miller. And these, they're like 34, but I'm selling them for 25. Okay, so I do have these for 25. And then this one is my latest book that's come out. That's the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads. I don't know, some of you probably heard me speak on this maybe a little bit, maybe not. But this was a thrill because my daughter did a lot of the pictures. She's quite the photographer. And these are usually 20-something. I'm selling them for $20. So if you want one, come on up. That would be great. And enjoy doing this stuff. There's some great history right here in Mississippi. And I tell you, Jill has done a fantastic job, and her staff. Thank you, of course, the people who put all this on. But you know, when I started doing internships at the college and wanted to make this happen, I wasn't looking for museums that they didn't do anything with. They're just kind of dusty and this place is happening. They're always bringing in people. They're bringing in displays. There's always something going on here. And so I'm just thrilled to have our students to be able to learn from you and the folks here. And your staff have been wonderful. But anyway, I don't want to keep droning on and on. But again, thank you so much for having me. Where are you from? Oh, wow, that's good.